Welcome True Stories Vault. Part 2. It was a simple thing. A very simple thing. But Inns had grown up in a house where a meal placed in front of her father was received as an expectation rather than a gift. And something about the quiet directness of those two words settled somewhere in her chest and stayed there. In the afternoon, she found the bookshelves. They were in a small room off the main hallway, a room she might have taken for a closet if the door hadn't been standing open. Inside were 3 full shelves of books, a lamp and a chair positioned beneath the window, at an angle that caught the afternoon light perfectly. It was so deliberately arranged, so clearly a private space that she almost backed out without going further, but the titles pulled her in. She was standing there, head tilted sideways, reading spines when she heard him in the doorway. "Sorry," she said, straightening. "I didn't mean to intrude." "You're not," he said. She looked at him. He was leaning against the doorframe with his arms loosely crossed, and there was something in his expression she hadn't seen before. Not quite ease, but the early edge of it, like a door opened just slightly, not yet wide. "You read a great deal," she said. "When it's quiet," he said, "which is most of the time." She thought about asking him why a man who clearly valued his solitude had the particular reputation he did in Caldwell Crossing, but she had been wondering about it since last night. The gap between the man the town described and the man who had covered her with a blanket and made her coffee and told her the door had a bolt on the inside so she wouldn't have to worry. She didn't ask. Not yet. Instead, she pulled a book from the shelf, held it up with a questioning look, and he nodded once. She took it to the sitting room. He went back to whatever he'd been doing, and for the rest of the afternoon, the house held them both in that particular comfortable quiet that is rarer and more valuable than most people realize. It was after supper she had cooked again, and he had not argued that the question finally found its way into the open. They were sitting on the porch. The evening was cool and clear after the storm, the kind of sky that looks painted at too many stars to count. Inns had a cup of tea. Harley had nothing, just his elbows on his knees and his eyes on the middle distance. "They say you ran a man out of town," she said. 3 years ago." He didn't tense, didn't shift. "They say a lot of things," he said. "I know," she said. "I'm not asking what they say. I'm asking what happened." A long pause, the kind that isn't evasion. "Just thought." "Man named Pritchard," Harley said finally. "He was taking water rights from the smaller farms, legal enough on paper, but he'd gotten those signatures through pressure, not agreement. Some of those farmers couldn't read what they were signing." He paused. I could looked at him. "I made it difficult for him to stay," Harley said simply. "He left. The farms kept their water." He glanced at her sideways. "Nobody thanked me for it. Had they just decided I was the kind of man who makes things difficult?" The silence that followed was a thoughtful one. "And are you?" Inns said quietly. "The kind of man who makes things difficult?" He considered that for a moment with what she was beginning to recognize as his characteristic honesty. "Only for the right people," he said. She should have gone to bed. It was late and the road might clear by tomorrow, and she had places to be, and a cousin expecting her and a future to build out of whatever she could carry in a single bag. But she sat on that porch a while longer, and so did he. It was Harley who finally spoke, and what he said was not what she expected. "Your father," he said quietly. "Not a question. Not exactly." Inns went still. "You didn't leave because of rain," he said. He wasn't looking at her, and he was still looking at the sky, the same steady way he looked at everything. Nobody packs a bag and walks out in the dark over weather. She didn't answer right away. The words her father had said. "Hector Baines has made an offer, a fair one. I've accepted," sat in her chest like stones. "He arranged a marriage," she said finally, "without asking me, to a man I wouldn't have chosen in 100 years. Harley was quiet for a moment. "And he'll come looking," he said. It wasn't a question this time. Enns felt the truth of it land with a weight she'd been out running since last night. "Yes," she said. "He will." The stars were very bright. The night was very still, and somewhere down the dark road that led back toward Caldwell Crossing, a lantern was already moving. She didn't see it, but Harley did. Well, he'd seen it from the porch for the last 10 minutes. The distant bobbing light of someone who knew exactly where they were going and had no intention of stopping until they got there. Thank you for watching the video, please. Subscribe and like. For next part's True Stories Vault, then the room settled into focus around her, and everything came back at once. The fire had burned down to a low, steady flame. Gray morning light was pressing through the front window. She was still in the chair. She had fallen asleep sitting up, which told her more about how exhausted she'd been than she cared to admit. The blanket across her shoulders was thick and wool and smelled faintly of cedar. Someone had covered her in the night. She sat with that fact for a moment, unsure what to do with it. From somewhere deeper in the house came the quiet sounds of a kitchen, the dull knock of a pot, the soft rush of water. Enns folded the blanket carefully, set it on the arm of the chair, and stood. Her boots were dry. Her coat, which she had no memory of removing, it was hung over the back of the second chair, facing the fire. She moved toward the kitchen doorway and stopped just short of it. Harley Thornwell was standing at the stove with his back to her, sleeves rolled to the elbow, pouring coffee into 2 tin cups, with the unhurried ease of a man who had done this same thing alone every morning for a very long time. He hadn't heard her yet, or if he had, he gave no sign of it. Enns watched him for a moment, just a moment before she spoke. "You didn't have to cover me," she said. He didn't startle. He simply set the pot down, picked up both cups, and turned around. "You were shivering," he said, and held one of the cups out to her. She crossed the kitchen and took it. Their fingers didn't touch. She noticed without meaning to that he had been careful about that. Duh. They drank the coffee standing on opposite sides of the kitchen, which felt like the right amount of distance for 2 strangers who had spent the night under the same roof without meaning to. Outside, the wind had softened. The rain was gone. Through the kitchen window, Enns could see the yard in pale morning light, the fence posts, the empty corral, the long, flat reach of land beyond. "The south road," she said. "Is it clear yet?" "Might be by mid-am morning," Harley said. "Depends on how fast the water moves." She nodded and looked into her cup. She was doing arithmetic in her head. How far to the next town? How long on foot? Whether her cousin in Marsville would ask too many questions or too few. "Where are you headed?" he asked. It wasn't a demanding question. It carried no edge, and he asked it the same way he told her about the flooded creek, like a man who thought information was practical and didn't see the use in withholding it or asking for it rudely. "East," she said. He accepted that without pressing further, and she found herself unexpectedly grateful for it. By the time the sun had fully risen, it was clear the road was not going to be passable by mid-morning. A boy from the nearest farm down the road, no older than 12, riding a mule with the confidence of someone 3 times his age, came by to say the creek had taken out the low bridge overnight. It would be at least 2 days before a wagon could cross, maybe 3. Enns stood on the porch and received this news with the particular stillness of someone who has run out of immediate options and is reorganizing around that fact. That Harley stood beside her, not close, just present. "You can stay," he said when the boy and his mule had gone. "Until the road clears. There's a spare room upstairs. Door has a bolt on the inside." She looked at him. "I'm telling you that," he said, meeting her eyes. "So you know I'm not asking you to trust me, just offering you a dry place to wait." It was the most words he had strung together since she'd arrived, and there was something in the plainness of them, the complete absence of performance that made Enns feel unexpectedly steadied. "People will talk," she said. People already talk, he replied, about me anyway. You just be new material. There was no bitterness in it. He said it like a man who had long since stopped expecting the world to be otherwise. Inns almost smiled. Almost. All right, she said. 2 days. The first full day passed in a careful, quiet rhythm that surprised her. She had expected awkwardness, the sharp-edged kind that comes from two strangers navigating shared space without a map. Instead, the house seemed to absorb them both without effort. Harley worked outside through most of the morning, repairing a section of fence that the storm had damaged. Inns, unwilling to sit idle, found the kitchen in a state of functional neglect. Nothing dirty, nothing broken, just the accumulated disorder of a man who cooked for survival rather than pleasure, and quietly set about reorganizing it. She told herself it was something to do with her hands. That was all. When Harley came in at midday, he stopped in the kitchen doorway and looked at it for a moment without speaking. "You didn't have to do that," he said. I know," she said, and set a plate on the table in front of him. He sat down. "He ate," he said after a few minutes. "It's good.